coaches, and fans. This is Michael Reeves, and tonight we would like to bring you a season recap and a playoff preview for our autumn wind season. When the year began, there were 30 teams with aspirations of making it to the playoffs and hopefully to our Super Bowl called the Ooper Bowl. And at the end of our season, there are 12 teams whose dreams are still alive. And tonight we're going to talk about those 12 teams, but in particular, we're going to focus on Wild Card Weekend, which takes place, as you can see on the screen. Hopefully you can see on the screen this weekend, which is the weekend of the 3rd and the 4th. Some of the games already have been scheduled and the rest will be scheduled soon. And of course, everybody will get the chance to be a spectator in those games, and hopefully we'll be able to broadcast them as well. So we want to talk about those 4 games coming up this weekend. But first, we wanted to pay homage to the 4 clubs who will be watching the games this weekend, who will be sitting out, and they'll be doing a little bit of scouting because they had the top 4 records in the league. And those include the Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks, and the San Francisco 49ers. So let's take a look here at our standings. We in Autumn Wind, just to review, if you're just watching this video and don't know much about our league, this is a 30-team football league in which we play Stratomatic football, which initially began as a card and dice game and now has evolved into an online game and an online gaming community with some fine people and some very, very good football minds. And I personally joined this Autumn Wind League last year. I am coaching my Los Angeles Rams, my favorite team from my childhood. Unfortunately, in my 2 seasons, they have not fared very well. Some poor quarterbacking, Matt Castle last season, and Bryce Petty. The team is not ready to compete, but slowly but surely, we are going to build this club. This season, I finished 3-13, and several of these clubs that are in the playoffs should send me a thank you note because I gave them an easy victory. But we're not here to talk about my Los Angeles Rams. We are here to talk about the 12 playoff teams. 8 will play this weekend, and 4 teams will sit out. This is a 30-team league in which there are 15 in the American Football Conference, and there are 15 clubs in the National Football Conference. 6 teams in each conference qualify for the playoffs. The 2 teams with the top records sit it out, and they will watch the other 4 wild card clubs play this weekend. So let's take a look at the teams who will be sitting it out. And first and foremost, we have to mention Dennis Crowley, who is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He is the Seattle Seahawks in a lot of online leagues. He plays in a bunch of them, and he is a fine coach. And here is more proof of his outstanding skill set. A perfect 16-0 regular season. Again, we have an outstanding website. I play in several leagues, and this is far and away one of the most comprehensive websites that you're going to find. In fact, if you scroll up, you can basically go back through the years and take a look at the standings all the way to 2004. I will say this, the 2004 and 2005 links, I was unable to hit them. It looks like the links are broken. But in my research, I know there was an email that went out a few weeks ago to congratulate Dennis on his outstanding season. To my knowledge, in the years I was able to reference, and there are a lot of them, this league has been around for 14 years, but in the last 12, I have not seen another team go a perfect 16-0. There have been several clubs that have gone 15-1. Dennis appears to be the only 16-0 team, unless there were undefeated seasons in 2004 and 2005. Again, I could not reference that website, but as you can see, he was quite dominant through the year, scoring 429 points, which was second most in his conference. And he also allowed the fewest amount of points in 165, by far and away the best point differential in the entire league at 264. At the beginning of the season, Dennis and I had a season preview, and I remember him distinctly saying this was not one of his better clubs, and he felt like this was an 11 or 12 win club. And I'm not sure if he Lou Holtzed us or if he was serious about that. But again, a 16-0 season. Fantastic job, Dennis, clearing away the number 1 seed. But that is not to take anything away from the second club, which is going to be sitting this weekend, and that is Mark LePage's Dallas Cowboys, who stand at 14-1-1. An outstanding season for Mark. He deserves the number 2 seed. He is an outstanding coach. I got a chance to play his club twice, and by play his club, I mean I played with him for about a quarter, and then he quit monkeying around and destroyed my Los Angeles Rams. Great coach, good guy too on top of that. He's going to create a lot of trouble. Would not at all be surprised if they match up one more time with Dallas and Seattle. That represents their 1 loss for the season. They also have a tie, I believe, against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So if we take a look at the NFC, the 2 clubs who will be sitting out both share 13-3 records. The first is Nathan Baylor and his Houston Texans. Now, what's interesting about this is that Nathan also went to the Uper Bowl. He went to the Uper Bowl last year, faced off with Dennis Crowley, who is the defending Autumn Wind champions. Our Super Bowl, of course, is called the Uper Bowl. And last year, he was able to take unheralded Case Keenum to the championship until finally bowing out in that final game. This year, before the season, he dealt Case Keenum and had a very high draft pick and was able to nab Dak Prescott, who had an absolutely phenomenal year for him. And now he finds himself once again at 13-3 and right in the thick of it. Also coming in at 13-3 are the San Francisco 49ers, and they are coached by Lawrence Green. And take a look at this. That's the scariest number, 508 points that Lawrence was able to roll up this season. They scored a lot, they let up a lot, but this is going to be an exciting team, and it's going to be a challenge. When you're looking at a team that averages more than 30 points a game, that's very intimidating. So we'll see if the 49ers and the Texans are able to face off as the top records in each league, to see if they will be playing each other at the end of this for the chance to play in the Uper Bowl, or if some of these other clubs that are playing in the wild card weekend will be able to surprise each of these clubs. So let's take a look at the wild card weekend and the clubs who will be facing off against each other. Again, some have been scheduled, some will be scheduled soon. We'll have the opportunity to spectate, and in some cases, we will broadcast some of these games and put them on YouTube for you to view at the time or later. The first game pits the New Orleans Voodoo against the Philadelphia Eagles. Also in the AFC, we have the San Diego Chargers taking on the Chicago Bears. In the NFC, the 4 wild club cards include Carolina Panthers, and they will be traveling to Oakland to face the Raiders. And finally, the St. Louis Rams will travel to Miami to play the Dolphins. So let's go over each one of these games. We'll go back to the standings. There's not going to be a lot of visual with this. I basically have notes that I cannot share. You can probably hear them there, but I cannot share them. But I will be giving you notes, and every once in a while I'll be able to float to each one of these team pages so I can take a look a little bit more at the statistics. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to give the records for each one of these clubs. I'm going to give the coaches' names for each one of these clubs, and I'm going to give some of the highlights for each of these teams. But also, too, I've taken the step, and please, no wagering, and no offense to this, I've also put point spreads on each one of these and also over-unders just for fun. Again, no wagering. So let's talk about the New Orleans Voodoo. They are coached by Butch Schreck, a longtime Stratomatic veteran. What popped out at me immediately for this club was the fact that they allowed only 179 points for the season. That is the second fewest allowed in the entire league, second only to the Seattle Seahawks, who let up 165 points. One of the strengths of their team clearly is their pass defense. In Stratomatic, we play what's called a double counting league, in which the ratings of the players will determine the strength of the card. And the team defense card that the cards that the Voodoo are playing with will be a good run card, but an excellent pass defense. So how did they arrive at an excellent pass defense? Well, they're standing with 6, 5, 5, and 6 in the defensive secondary. That's cornerbacks with 6 and 5, and the safeties at 5 and 6. They are led by Marcus Peters. They also have a 6-rated linebacker in CJ Mosley. Again, very, very strong defense, which shows the 179 points they allowed. That was not a fluke. You still have to coach this team up, but when you're staring at a defense that is barely allowing more than 11 points a game, once again, the Eagles are going to have their work cut out for them. Now, to contrast that, however, it's not all sunshine and lollipops for the Voodoo. They also scored 290 points, which actually puts them in the bottom third of the league. So not a point-scoring team. They're going to have to keep this game close against Philadelphia. Cam Newton is their quarterback. He only finished the season with a 45% completion percentage, which is it's not that you're not that good. 45% completion percentage. Ryan Matthews, veteran Ryan Matthews, who's no longer in the league, finished the year with 1,200 yards. So for the Voodoo to have any chance in this game, they've got to keep it close. They've got to grind out this game. They're going to have a difficult time trying to win this game through the air. What's going to hurt them also is the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles, again, this is a 12-4 club coached by Dave Smolinski. The Eagles did not make the playoffs last year. The Voodoo did, excuse me. Now they are running up against a defense that has a good run card, but an average pass card. So again, the Voodoo are going to try to grind it on the ground, but they're going to run into trouble because, again, the Eagles have a good run card, but just an average pass card. They have very strong linebackers as well, so Cam Newton is going to be forced to throw short and long as there are 5 and 6s in those flat pass zones. But if there is a silver lining for the Voodoo, the defensive backs are 0s and 4s. So there could be some vulnerability in the secondary, but again, you're asking Cam Newton to do something that, if guessed right, he's going to have a very difficult time doing. 432 points scored for those Philadelphia Eagles, a very strong 12-4 season for this club, and they only allowed 273 points, so that's quite a point differential, more than 10 points per game. So they were a very strong team. They are led by Kirk Cousins, who completed 53% of his passes this year, 34 touchdowns against 17 interceptions. As I was going through each of these quarterbacks, that is a very, very difficult ratio to master. Many of these quarterbacks did have more touchdowns than interceptions, but maybe it was 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 or 7, but you are hard-pressed to find someone who has doubled the number of interceptions with touchdowns. So that's quite a season for Kirk Cousins. He has a two-headed monster running back set. Paul Perkins is his lead back, and his backup running back, I have to check this real quick. I believe I've got this wrong. Let me look at his second running back here quickly. Bear with me. I'll take a look at one of the box scores. I wrote down Ryan Matthews, and I know that is not correct. It's DeMarco Murray. I'm sorry, it's not DeMarco Murray. I'm sorry. No, it is Ryan Matthews. Okay, well, I have messed this up. Let me go back to the Voodoo here real quick, because I wrote down Ryan Matthews as the running back for both of these clubs. That is incorrect. Let's go back here and check this just to make sure. I see. Okay, so it's Latavius Murray. I apologize. So Latavius Murray finished the season with 1,600 yards. So he was the workhorse back for New Orleans. But again, he's going to have some tough sledding against a good defensive card, good rush defensive card put up by Philadelphia. So it is Ryan Matthews, the retired running back who led the club with 1,200 yards. But they also have a solid backup in Paul Perkins, who rushed for another 600 yards. They do not really have a stud wide receiver or tight end truly to speak of. The key stat that I found that I felt was interesting, I believe for the Voodoo to have any chance, again, they have to have a grinded out game, but they also have to force some turnovers. Interestingly, Philadelphia lost 11 fumbles this season, which put them among the upper echelon of teams who coughed up the ball. New Orleans only fumbled the ball 4 times this season. So again, this should be a game that the Eagles win. Of the games that I have, it's the highest point spread that I came up with. I came up with an 8-point spread, giving 3 points for the home team, as Vegas does. But I have an over-under that's a little low at 39. I feel like, again, this is going to be a grind-out game. But at the end of this, I don't believe the Voodoo are going to have enough offensively to keep up with the Eagles. I believe the game will be closer than the 8-point spread, but I do believe the Eagles will move on to the second round. So that leads us to our second game in the AFC, and that pits the San Diego Chargers, 9-7, who made the playoffs last year. They are coached by Paul Mankiewicz. They are going to Chicago to shuffle with the Bears, and they finished the season 12-4. They are coached by Luke Delfume. Interesting thing about this club, the Bears 1-15 last season. So you have to think, what would have made the difference for the Bears? And I counter with what a difference a Zeke makes, and that would be Ezekiel Elliott. The star running back for the real-life Cowboys rushed for 1,700 yards for the Bears on a workhorse like 366 carries. So clearly, this is a team that's going to grind it out, but they do have a talented quarterback and a young quarterback, one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL with a lot of potential, and that is Marcus Mariota, who finished with, I don't have his quarterback stats, but I did list his star receivers. He does have 2 very, very talented receivers to throw to, and that is Odell Beckham with 85 catches for 1,100 yards. But he also has a very strong second wide receiver, which is kind of rare for this league. A lot of these clubs, statistically, when you check this out, a lot of them are led in receptions by tight ends and running backs, but this is one of the rare clubs that has 2 wide receivers with 69 or more catches, and that is what Emmanuel Sanders has. So he is their deep threat. Can't pay too much attention to Odell Beckham. You don't want to go sleeping on Emmanuel Sanders. Defensively, the Bears. Let's go visit the Chicago Bears. 315 points scored, 234 points allowed. That's a pretty strong defense. They run a 4-3. They have a good defense run card and a good defense pass card. The strength of their team, I found, was their linebackers, of which they have 2 6-rated linebackers, so be wary of the flat passes against 2 6s. But their defensive backs are just average, so there is the opportunity to throw on this club. So let's take a look at the underdog here in this contest. That would be Paul Mankiewicz and his Chargers, and let's see who he has as far as quarterbacking power. What can he do against this club? First of all, one thing that we noticed that both clubs did score just over 300 points, so they're pretty equal offensively. However, defensively, the Bears were able to hold their opponents to 40 less points. As we'll see, the San Diego Chargers did allow 272. That's not much of a point differential at 31. But again, you throw the records out the window. You throw the point differentials out the window. He made the playoffs, but you do kind of look for tendencies as to why a team made the playoffs and what strengths or weaknesses they bring into these playoffs. They were led by quarterback Colin Kaepernick. And when I say led, I mean that loosely because he completed a mere 44% of his passes. So you take the good with the bad. What's the good? He rushed for 1,000 yards. Again, you're very hard pressed to find a team in this league, especially in this modern day passing era where you have 2 1,000-yard rushers. We'll try this on for size. One of them was their quarterback, Colin Kaepernick. I remember playing this Charger team, and it's a very difficult thing because Kaepernick does have a number of runs on his card. He does have the eligibility to run for several times during the game, and he has a ton of short gains. And his pass card, when guessed right, has a lot of must runs, and he has a dynamic must run card. So sometimes there's some things that you can't do anything about, but maybe you need to anticipate the run just a little bit more against this club, knowing a 45% completion percentage, maybe you would say, let's see if Colin can beat us through the air. Let's see if we've got anything else on here. Le'Veon Bell, by the way, was his backfield mate, and he rushed for 1,250 yards and also had 500 yards through the air. Not much as far as wide receivers, tight ends are concerned. No huge concerns there. They play a 4-3 defense. He has an excellent run defense and just an average pass defense. So how do you come to this? He has 5s and 6s on his defensive line. But interestingly enough, from a defensive back, one of his defensive backs is a 0. So we'll see how the Bears are able to handle that. And again, when you have 2 stud wide receivers like Odell Beckham and Emmanuel Sanders, as one of them is going to be guarded by a 0, that means Paul's going to have to seriously consider some double teams and doing some things that are a little bit different. And we'll have to see if Marcus Mariota, Odell Beckham, and Emmanuel Sanders can take advantage of that. Again, the Bears finished the season 12-4. San Diego Chargers finished the season 9-7. On this game, I have a +7 point spread advantage for the Bears. I have the over-under at 41. I believe the Bears will win this, and in my estimation, I think they can cover this spread. It just depends on whether or not Colin Kaepernick can get some of those must-run calls and some guessed-wrong end-run calls. What did I notice about this game? Here's my key stat. San Diego Superchargers, 52 sacks on the year, by far and away the most in the entire league. On the other hand, the Bears only allowed 6 sacks, which was among the fewest in the league. So how is this game going to go? Pretty simple. If San Diego can figure out a way to get to this quarterback, they can win. If they cannot get to Marcus Mariota, I think it's going to be tough sledding for the Chargers. And I predict the Bears will win this and cover the spread. So let's go to the NFC. And as we'd mentioned before, this is an interesting group of playoff teams where all of them actually were able to eclipse the double-digit win mark. So let's focus first on the Carolina Panthers, coached by Dan Shore. They finished the season 10-6. They did not make the playoffs last year. Against the Oakland Raiders, coached by Tim Bowler, who went 12-4 this season, they did make the playoffs this year. Tim's club was able to score 400 points and only allowed 265. That's quite a point differential. Nearly 8 more points, outscoring their opponents by nearly 8 points a game. On the other hand, Dan Shore's Carolina Panthers outscored their opponents 368-302. So that's about 4 points a game, more points than their opponents. Defensively, average for the Raiders. So that's quite an accomplishment to allow only 265 points with average defensive cards. On the other hand, the Panthers roll with a 3-4. They also roll with a 3-4. They have an average run defense and a good pass defense. So let's focus on their pass defense. They do have a very strong secondary. It's very difficult to go against this team with a nickel defense. In fact, they have a Janoris Jenkins is a 6-rated cornerback, and they have not one but 2 5-rated corners. So you can't run a nickel on this team because you're going to be facing up with a 6, a 5, and a 5. So that's pretty strong. Let's see. All right, so let's talk about their offense here real quick. So Carolina's offense is led by the number 1 quarterback card in the set, and that belonged to Matt Ryan, who in autumn wind this season was able to complete 60% of his passes. In this league, that is a super, super strong number. And he also threw for 3,700 yards. Top target was Demetrius Thomas with 84 catches and 1,000 yards. But it's also nice when you've got so much attention being paid to Demetrius Thomas. You want to be very careful about that free safety double team because he does have Ted Ginn, who has a very strong long pass card. So again, you want to be very careful against that club. Not really strong as far as running is concerned. So the Panthers do tend to put the ball up a little bit more than some of the other coaches in this league. So they're going to try to air it out this weekend against those Oakland Raiders, who again have an average defense. No stars truly on defense. And interestingly enough, they have a 0-rated outside linebacker in Shane Ray. He does have an 11. They do have Irvin, the Seattle linebacker as well, has a pass rush of 10. But not a huge amount of sacks for this team. They're in the top 10 in the league in sacks with 25. So you could tell that Tim Bowler calls a pretty good game. Pretty good game to get this team to only 265 points allowed with average cards, run and pass. So we have a matchup of last year's Super Bowl quarterbacks, Matt Ryan for the Carolina Panthers, and here is terrific Tom Brady for the Oakland Raiders. And he was able to have a monster year for this club, at least when it came to completion percentage, 61% completion percentage for the season. 3,300 yards passing, not great, but when you have the real Slim Shady in the backfield, maybe you can be a little bit more careful, a little bit more cautious, and hit the flats. Shady had 1,800 yards rushing for the season. So a phenomenal year for LaShawn McCoy. Terrific weapons to throw to for Tom Brady as well. Antonio Brown with 76 catches, but interestingly enough, he did not eclipse the 1,000-yard mark, only 867. His teammate, tight end Martellus Bennett, also had 76 catches as well. So Tom Brady does have a few weapons. Interestingly enough, they do have some strengths offensively, but defensively, I marvel at the fact that he was able to only allow 265 points with a defense with a 0, number one, and number two, just average cards. So fine job by Tim Bowler to get this team to 12-4. My key stats, please don't shake your head and say this is weak, but this game could be a close one. I could see this one actually being decided by a field goal. And if that's the case and it comes down to the toe of either of these two place kickers, I believe that the Raiders do have a distinct advantage. Chris Boswell this year had a terrific year with 34 out of 36 field goals. And his opponent, Carolina Panthers, Dan Shore's kicker, Justin Tucker, was only able to hit 27 out of 34. So again, if this comes down to the end of the game, I believe this is advantage Oakland when it comes to special teams, particularly when it comes to kicking. 12-4 record against 10-6. This is the lowest line of all of the games that I had point spreads for. This one I have at 6. Advantage Raiders, and I also had 42 points. I feel like there will be some points scored in this game. 42 points over under, plus 6 for the Raiders. I believe that the Raiders will be able to win this game, and I believe they will cover those 6 points. So I believe that Tim Bowler will move on to the following round. And last, let's go visit the St. Louis Rams, who are traveling to sunny Miami this weekend. The St. Louis Rams are coached by Gary Nagata, who finished at 11-5. They did not make the playoffs last year. And most clearly, Miami, who had the most unbelievable turnaround in one season. In 2016, this club finished 2-14. In 2017, this club is 11-5. So we had two clubs who were absolutely able to turn things around. And that would, of course, be the Chicago Bears, who added 11 wins to their total. And you've got Dan Morin, who is a relatively new coach to this league. I was with him in an expansion draft. And he was able to add 9 wins to his club and make the playoffs. So congratulations to Dan. So let's talk about St. Louis. St. Louis is led by Big Ben Roethlisberger, 56% completion percentage, 3,400 yards. His main back, Mark Ingram, 1,100 yards. But also, interestingly, his backup is Zach Zerner, who finished with 500 yards. So that's a nice 1-2 punch out of that backfield. So these are two ball control offenses for sure, but no team wants to sleep on the long pass threats that St. Louis can throw at you, and that includes Pierre Garçon, that'd be Jeremy Maclin, and Brian Quick. They have three wide receivers who are averaging more than 12 yards per catch. So there is the threat of long pass. So you got to be very careful about moving that free safety around. On defense, Gary Nagata's Rams feature an average run defense, but their pass defense is good. And this is another team that can go nickel and not lose out. They have a cornerback 6 in Akeem Talib, and they also have 2 5s. So you can't go nickel against this club and gain an advantage. So let's go to Dan Morin, the turnaround kid. 11-5 this season. In the NFC, they were second in the Walsh division behind the San Francisco 49ers. Very strong offense, 438 points scored, only 290 points allowed. They were beating opponents pretty soundly by 9 points a game, in fact. So let's talk about what was their difference maker. Well, have fun finding it, because you're not going to find a draft pick like a Dak Prescott or an Ezekiel Elliott or a Jordan Howard. There really wasn't that big a difference maker. Who was their difference maker? You guessed it, Matt Moore, reserve quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, the real-life Miami Dolphins of last year. He was traded by the Berlin Thunder, I believe, early in the season for a third-round pick, and he wow, what a season for Matt Moore. 56% of his passes were completed for 3,800 yards. I want to take a look at the league stats to see if that was among the upper echelon. We'll be looking for that here in just a moment. Isaiah Crowell is his lead running back with 1,350 yards. Also, Darren Sproles finished with 600 yards rushing and also 600 yards receiving. So he's a weapon on the ground and a weapon through the air. Here, I want to take a look at these statistics. I was just blown away by Matt Moore's tremendous season. So let's take a look at some of these stats here. So there we find him with 3,800 yards passing, and just a quick glance, these are not sortable. So let me just take a look through here real quick. The leading passer for the year was Sam Bradford with 4,400. But at 3,800, as you can see, you're hard-pressed to find anybody else who threw for that many. There's another exception there. That would be Carson Palmer, but he threw the ball, look at this, 740 times. 740 times this season for the St. Louis Cardinals. Eli Manning also finished with 3,900 yards through the air, and he also had 644 attempts to do it. So Matt Moore, clearly the surprise player of this season. If there was such an award as the comeback player of the year, I would imagine he would get it. His favorite target, Jordy Nelson, 74 catches for 1,100 yards. So let's look at the defenses for both of these clubs. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, the St. Louis Rams, who I felt was a team that was a sleeper team throughout this year, and I think they could be a very strong team here in this playoffs. Again, Gary Nagata is an excellent coach, and I think this team is going to be very, very tough out here in these playoffs. Although, if you look during the season, 336 points scored, 300 points allowed. It's the smallest point differential of all of the playoff teams. But I think some of that could be answered by the fact that he did play in a relatively tough division. As we can see, there were 3 clubs, including the Rams, the Raiders, and the Texans, that finished with double-digit wins. So it was not a cakewalk in that division. Looking at their defense, they have an average run defense and a good pass defense. And as we covered earlier, 5-5-6, corner 6, Akeem Talib, and 2 other corners at 5. So that's very strong. Don't go 3 wide on that team. You'll have some difficulty. On the other hand, Miami, the Dolphins, a good run defense and an excellent pass defense. They allowed 290 points this season. And again, you look at that point differential, they were outscoring clubs by 9 points in every game. They have 2 6-rated cornerbacks. So we're going to find out just how much this club can run the ball. I would get the feeling we're going to see heavy doses of Ingram and Zach Zerner. And maybe some flat passes, as their linebackers are just so-so, but they have a 6-rated safety in Eric Weddle and Chris Harris and Grimes at a corner 6. So you'll have a tough time with the short and long passes there. So we'll see what Miami chooses to do, if they do a little stand-around defense or they challenge them in such a way and move that free safety into the flat pass zones to keep Big Ben guessing. The key stat for this game that I found, and I think this is going to tell the tale. And again, a strong performance from a team that just had not a terrific defense, a good defense, pass-wise, not great. Again, this is to the strength of Nagata's coaching. On third down conversions, the Rams were the second stingiest club in the league, only allowing 29.9% of third down conversions. Again, that was second in the entire autumn wind of 30 clubs. On the other hand, you have the 5th-rated team for converting third downs, and that is Dan Morin's Miami Dolphins at a healthy clip of 44%. So the thing to watch out for this game, third downs. If St. Louis can keep up that stinginess and turn Miami over, or turn them into punts, I guess would be more accurate, St. Louis stays in this game. If they can't, Miami moves on. I feel like these two clubs are very, very close, and I have given Miami. I said a moment ago that the smallest point spread that I had in the league was 6, and actually it's this one. I have this one at a 5-point spread, and I also have a 42-point over-under, because I believe that if Miami is able to run out, St. Louis has the weapons to keep up with them. But again, if it's going to be a grind-out game, 2 fine running backs for Miami, they can play in either direction. If they have to grind it out, they have Isaiah Crowell and Sproles. They can grind it out. If they need to put it through the air, they're going to count on the arm of Matt Moore again, who you would think we're going to challenge him through the air, and maybe that's the issue, that he was able to complete 56% of his passes. Maybe they just didn't believe in him. We'll see if Gary believes in him this weekend. Again, 5-point spread. I believe that St. Louis will be able to eat into that spread, but I honestly think it's a pick. I mean, either one of these teams could wind up going in the next direction, but I think that St. Louis will keep it closer than 5 points, and I believe that this score will be under 42. So there we have it. There is your playoff preview. There are your clubs, and basically the winners of these 4 clubs will move on to the second round to play the 4 clubs earlier that we had mentioned. I'm going to call back up the schedule here momentarily, and we will wrap this show up. So I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, no harm, no foul, no hurt feelings. I care a great deal about this league, and I want to try to put something together for everyone to enjoy, and I do hope that you enjoyed this broadcast. I'm waiting for the schedule to pop up, and it looks like it's not going to cooperate for me. So again, check your emails. The broadcasts are going to be listed, and also the spectator versions are going to be listed as well. Oh, I see. Oh, good. They posted it here. So the Seattle Seahawks will take on the worst ranked wild card winner this Sunday. And the Dallas Cowboys will take on the second best. And that is, of course, because they have the second seed. So if you look here in the AFC, Once again, that is the Voodoo, who is the 6th rated team, the Chargers as the 5th rated team, or the Chicago Bears. So I guess any of those teams could potentially face the Seattle Seahawks. And again, the number 1 seed for the NFC is the Houston Texans, and they will take on the worst ranked number 1 winner. So that would be either the number 6 Carolina Panthers. And again, that's a 10-win club. There will be no gimmies when you get to the divisional playoffs. The number 5 team is the Miami Dolphins and St. Louis Rams. Again, a very strong number 5 seed. So again, Houston can't look past any of these clubs. Number 4 is the Miami Dolphins, so they will take on one of those 3 teams. And then we have the number 2 seeded, I think that's the number 2 San Francisco 49ers. I think that should say the number 2 San Francisco 49ers, and they will take on the 2nd lowest record of those 4 seeds. So again, I appreciate you staying with me. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. I'll be posting it on the StratFam forum. And good luck, everybody, in the playoffs. And I hope to broadcast a few of those games. And we will see you next week for the divisional playoffs preview. Take care.